especially during this time, I think we've all come to appreciate the amazing work that our NHS does, the amazing work that the doctors and nurses and everyone who works in the NHS does. And it makes us really appreciative and thankful for all those who are training to be doctors and nurses. And that is what my guest today is doing. My name is Simon Henderson. I am Head of History and Sixth Form at Teesdale School, and this is episode 17 of Made in Teesdale.
Made in Teesdale.
And we actually sat there one night watching John Wayne's stage Ghostland projected onto the wall while looking down at the scene below.
It is absolutely fascinating seeing inner city London children dropped into the middle of a working farm.
I have very fond memories of growing up in Teesdale. I mean, living in the countryside and having, loads of fresh air, loads of space to play.
It really is the case that if you come from County Durham, and in my case have lived in southwest London for 40 years, but County Durham's still what I call home.
Made in Teesdale.
In today's episode, I am joined by Alec Saby, who is training to be a doctor and hopes to move on to a career in the Royal Army Medical Corps. Hi, Alec. How are you?
Hi, I'm really good, thank you.
Good stuff. Thanks for agreeing to appear on Made in Teesdale. I wonder if you could start by sketching for our listeners when it was that you were at Teesdale and what you remember of your time with us.
So I was at Teesdale from 2009 until 2016. So I stayed on for sixth form, and I just really enjoyed it. Really, I think it was always felt very comfortable. Felt small enough but big enough. I felt, especially in sixth form, that I was able to adapt the lessons to fit in with what worked for me. I felt like it was all just felt homely almost. Yeah, I really enjoyed my time at Teesdale.
Good. Talk to us about where you grew up in Teesdale.
So I grew up in Cutherston, went to Cutherston Primary School, and I love going back there now and just getting back to the serenity.
Yes. What is it that you miss about this region, would you say?
I think probably most the familiarity and the sense of knowing everyone and feeling not seeing any strangers in the street. Everything feels very homely and supported.
Yeah. So you studied with us obviously as a younger student, and then you went on into sixth form. Tell us about the subjects you did at sixth form.
So at sixth form I did maths, chemistry, biology, and I did physics, AS, and I did an EPQ.
Okay, what was your EPQ about? Talk to us about that.
So my EPQ was about the developments in the care of PTSD in the British Army. So that was a really good opportunity, actually. Mr. Nolan knew somebody at Catterick Garrison, so I was able to have a visit there and see the facilities, and that's something that's it was inspiring, and now I'm hoping to become an army doctor kind of because of that.
Yeah, so you're studying now to become an army doctor. Where do we find you in the world, and what's the state of that study?
So I'm in Sheffield at the moment, at the Uni of Sheffield, and I'm just revising for finals, which are at the start of April, so a little while away, but starting to get to pressure time. What
does that mean for people who've never studied a medical degree, which would be a large percentage of the population, including myself? What do finals look like? What sort of stuff do you get tested on?
So there's two types of exams. So one is the written exam. So there's a multiple choice exam and then a short answer question exam. And then the other half of it is practical exams. So this will be where you're in the room and then a patient will come in. You have to do a history or an examination, or sometimes it's communication stations. So the patient might be crying, or you need to tell them some bad news. So it's kind of testing the other side of being a doctor, the more kind of human interaction side.
Which bit do you find the hardest?
I think they both have their challenges. I think the human interaction side comes a bit more naturally to me. And I find that feels more natural, and it's quite easy to build a rapport with someone, and then you're a long way through at that point. Whereas the written exams, you either know it or you don't. You can't really blag your way through not knowing the answer.
Yes, you can put somebody at ease, and you can be more spontaneous about that. You can't really be spontaneous about a question that you either know the answer to or you don't know the answer to. So your long-term ambition is to go into the Royal Army Medical Corps and be a doctor in the army. What's the path to there from where you are now, about to study your finals?
So in August, hopefully, I'll start at an army hospital, and I'll have 2 junior doctor years. And then after that, I'll have a year of more army training. So I'll go to Sandhurst and learn the army side of things. So how to act as an officer and as a soldier. And then also have some army specific training for medicine. So things that you wouldn't really see in the NHS. Get some more training on that kind of thing. I think you learn a bit of vet care and a bit of dental care as well, which will be fun. And then after that, you are an army doctor, and you get to go on different attachments and hopefully get a lot of different opportunities.
What is it that makes you want to pursue your medical career with the army as opposed to maybe in general practice or in the NHS?
So I think long-term general practice is still something that really interests me. And I think general practice within the army is an option. But I think especially whilst I'm young, I still feel quite young to be becoming a doctor. I still feel like I want to do a lot of different things before I settle down and be a GP in Barney for 50 years or whatever. So I think the army provides an opportunity to see some different kinds of patients, go to lots of different places, kind of develop a bit of an interest.
So it's some of it's the travel that you would like to do, go and see different parts of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially in healthcare, there's a lot of challenges in different areas of the world, different considerations. You're not always going to have all the facilities we're lucky to have in the NHS. So I think that's an interesting angle that I just think it would be really interesting to have to consider all those things when you're delivering care.
And if my memory serves me correctly, you did some sort of overseas medical sort of or you did some sort of medical expedition when you were in sixth form or just left. What was that all about?
Yeah, so between year 12 and 13, I went on a trip to Tanzania to work in a hospital there for a couple of weeks. And that was just because I wanted to gain more of an insight into medicine. It was around the time I was writing my personal statement. So I was thinking of ways that I could explore more about medicine and make sure that I was going into it with like a well-rounded knowledge of what it actually is.
What sort of thing did you see when you were there?
Oh, it was mental. So lots of different things. So births and trauma, and it felt like it was more raw medicine because they didn't have scanners and they didn't have all the different technology they might need. They really had to use their brains and be like, how can we get around this issue? How can we apply medicine to the fullest? And like, it was just really inspiring. Yeah, it was really cool to see.
I guess you would have been 16, 17 at the time. That's quite a big thing to do. Firstly, to go to somewhere as far from Teesdale as Tanzania, and also then to see this pretty raw medicine, which I think is a good description for it. It obviously did confirm, because you're still doing it now and you're about to take your finals. Did that give you any doubt about like, oh my goodness, this is like quite scary stuff. Do I want to do this?
I think it definitely made me more aware of how, as a doctor, you kind of expose yourself and you are emotionally invested as well. So I think there's always been a question about, you have to make sure that you're able to handle that, because not everyone who could do it would be able to. You need to get the right balance of like a bit of a distance from the patient, but still really caring about them. But you can't take on everyone's emotions and then go and cry about it every night. So I think it kind of made me more aware of the effect the profession also has on you.
I was speaking to Ruby Carrington for the second episode of this podcast, and I know that when I contacted you for us to set up this interview, you said that you remembered as a sixth form student Ruby coming in to speak to you as a sixth former at the time she was studying medicine, to talk to you about, you know, studying medicine and some tips about how to get on the course and stuff like that. And one of the questions I asked Ruby that you've sort of touched on there a little bit in your answer, I just want to explore a little bit further. She talked about what she does to sort of try and protect her own mental health and her own sort of sense of well-being when she's maybe dealing with lots of traumatic stuff and seeing things. What do you do away from studying, away from practicing medicine, away from your course, to try and look after yourself and protect your own sort of well-being?
Yeah, so the main thing that springs to mind is fell running. So I'm really into fell running, especially in Sheffield, having the peaks on my doorstep. It's really nice just going out with friends or going by yourself, just going for a long run and getting some headspace, talking through things with friends. And it also reminds me of home, being able to just get up onto the fells and feel like you're a million miles from anything. I think it's a great feeling.
Now, what the listeners can't see, as this is a podcast and not a video, but what I can see over your left shoulder in our little video call to record this is some fairly impressive pairs of trainers that certainly bear testament to the fact that there's been some fell running going on, and also that you're also very clean, because they looked incredibly well. They're all laid out very neatly and they look like they've been washed regularly. Although the face that you're pulling suggests that maybe that isn't the case. Obviously we find ourselves medically in a pretty unique situation at the moment, certainly in terms of most people's lifetimes, if not in the sort of full scope of human history. We find ourselves in a time where medicine is more important in people's lives than at any other point in living memory. What impact has the pandemic had on your studies, and also on any sort of medical practice that you've been able to get, and sort of interaction with patients, etc.?
So I think there's two things. So last March, when it was all kicking off, quite quickly it realised that the course wasn't going to be able to flow as it normally does with all the different modules you do. But so we went into full lockdown for a while, but then as the pandemic ensued, we were asked to volunteer to come and help on the wards. And that was really nice, because that gave us a sense of purpose. Normally as a medical student, you're there for your learning, you're shadowing, whereas suddenly there was the need for us to get properly involved and really help. And I learned so much last summer being on a ward where I had a proper active involved role. And it also felt like the attitudes in the public towards the NHS changed at that time. Like, it felt like everyone was really valuing the NHS, and it just felt like a positive atmosphere. Although it was going through a strain and it's a pandemic, it felt like everyone was like in it together, like we've got this, and that was really nice. And then you asked about effect on patient interactions, and that's a big thing, because I've realised how obviously we're wearing masks all the time, often got a visor as well, apron, gloves. You don't look very human, and you can't like communicate. Normally 90% of interaction is non-verbal. You're smiling, you're gesturing, whereas so much of that's been lost. And yeah, I just find myself like trying to smile with my eyes the whole time. Like, it's really hard to, when you're going up to someone and you're asking them a question, you have to make an effort to still be showing that you're being nice. Yeah, I think there's definitely communication challenges that come with all the PPE and everything else.
So what do you think the path forward is? I asked Ruby this as well. As someone who understands this more than the average person on the street, what is the hope for us to get out of the current situation in the longer term?
Well, I'm not sure I'm as much of an expert as Ruby or other people, but I had my vaccine a couple of weeks ago, and that felt great. It felt like this is a way that a lot of people can get out of it. And even if coronavirus doesn't go, we'll get to a level where hopefully the most vulnerable people who represent the majority of admissions into the hospital are protected from the virus. And that means that we don't have to worry as much about the NHS being overwhelmed, because we can be sure that those people aren't going to be admitted. And I think that's like, it's every day when I see how many more people are being vaccinated, it's just, it's for once we can see a path out of it. But I don't think, especially in hospitals, I don't think masks and social distancing are going anywhere anytime soon. But yeah, the vaccinations, it makes me excited.
Yeah. So you foresee a situation basically whereby we are possibly still, just as a society, going to be wearing masks as a matter of course, maybe right into next year, do you think?
I think that seems like it would be sensible, because I think most people have adapted to it, haven't they? And it's an easy way to keep transmission controlled while still opening up a lot of things and trying to get the economy back. But I also think it's interesting about how comfortable people would feel taking their masks off, and like the mental health of people. I think we're really going to start to see, well, already we're seeing the effect that the lockdown has had on people's mental health. And I think especially as things start to open up, there'll be a lot of people who feel uncomfortable about it opening up.
Yeah.
Feel unsafe.
It's interesting, because I was having a conversation with somebody the other day. So many elements of society have now been sort of designed to be COVID safe. So, if you walk around the school, every classroom has hand sanitizer in. Every desk has hand wipes and antibacterial wipes to wipe down desks, to wipe down keyboards, to wipe down shared equipment. It strikes me that it's going to be a long time before people feel so confident in society that those things are someone's going to suddenly say you don't need to worry about sanitizing your hands so much, or you don't. It strikes me that that's going to be with us for years and years and years.
Yeah, and we've seen as well that this year the flu rates have been really far down, because people are being so much better with their hand hygiene and etc. So I think it's only a good thing if that continues. But yeah, maybe in the immediate future, even when lockdown eases, and in next year, people will still be having masks and hand sanitizer, because it'll just bring some level of reassurance, won't it, that we are still aware, even if we're able to get back to a new normal.
What's the counter argument there medically? If we all use hand sanitizer all the time for the next 10 years, is that likely to have any impact on people's general immunity if we're not really being exposed to any germs because we're so clean?
Yeah, this is an interesting point, and this is something that I looked into in second year, because I was interested in how there's this thing called germ theory, how kids who have grown up in Teesdale on farms, they've grown up with muggy hands and picking their fingernails when they've got mud in, because they're used to that low level bacteria. They have way less allergies, they get less flu, they get less asthma, compared to people who've grown up in the city and have a more sterile environment. Then they tend to have more sensitive immune systems or less resistance. So yeah, like you say, that could be a fact, that if people start to live in a more sterile world, then they'll have less of that background immunity. But I don't think that's been fully explored.
So you talked about, you're still young, and there's things that you want to do before you go off into the world and become a GP, possibly in the future. Is that something, you sort of half jokingly said, I'm still young before I settle down and be a GP for 50 years. Is that something that you see yourself doing when you're an older man, that you want to kind of settle down and work in a GP practice, or work in something that's maybe slightly less dynamic than working in the army?
Yeah, maybe. I think when I say old man, I just mean like my 30s.
Well, that's charming, Alec. Speaking of a 42-year-old, that makes me a very old man. Go on, carry on.
But yes, I think maybe in my early 30s I'll do GP training, and then be a GP somewhere. But something great that's emerging is something known as like portfolio GPs or portfolio medicine in general, where you don't do one job for 5 days a week. You have different special interests, and you have different. There's a lot of variety within medicine, so you can do, maybe I'd do GP 3 days, keep an interest in psychiatry and do a day of that, and then maybe go to a prison or a care home or a sports team for another day. Like, I'm looking forward to the flexibility of the role, really.
So what is it, at the heart of it, you're a smart guy. That's why you got the A-levels to be able to go and do, thankfully we don't just let anybody become doctors, because that would be a little bit frightening. You've got to be some of the most academically talented people in the country. What is it that motivates you to do it? What is it, is you're doing some tough study at the moment. It's a hard gig. You're going to see some difficult things. You have seen some difficult things. What is it ticking inside of you that motivates you to do a really difficult job?
I think for me, it's always been like making that difference to. I know it's easy to say making a difference to people's lives, but I've really seen how, especially in GP, you can develop such a relationship with the patient that they trust you. They're going to work with you. You're going to work together to overcome that illness and mean that they can make the most of their lives. And I think that's what really draws me to GP versus hospital medicine, is that you can follow someone over time, see them work with their illness, see them overcome it, see them being empowered to make changes themselves. And you can really see how together you're working together to make their lives better. And I think that's what's always drawn me to medicine, is I can't think of many other professions where you're not motivated by money and you're just trying to make people's lives better. Maybe you'd claim teaching, but yeah, I think it's a very privileged position.
Yeah, well, we're definitely not motivated by money, because we'd be doing a different job. But yeah, I think I wouldn't say that probably the work that we do is as vital in helping people in sort of the immediate sense that medicine does. But yeah, there are parallels in terms of trying to help people's development. So some of those students whose development we are trying to help at the moment obviously aren't with us in a physical sense. We're teaching them virtually, teaching them online. What sort of advice, I would imagine studying for a medical degree requires quite a lot of time sitting at your desk, in the books, working independently, being disciplined. What sort of advice would you give for students who maybe that doesn't come naturally to them, but suddenly they find themselves at home, not able to get that sort of social interaction with their peers, looking at a computer screen for 5 hours a day and doing their learning that way? What advice would you give them to sort of keep them going, keep them motivated?
Well, I think one thing that really helped my learning, and that Teesdale really helped with, is starting to understand what type of learner you are, starting to understand what works for you, especially if it's a lot over a computer from home, thinking about how you can shake things up, if there's any podcasts or YouTube videos, or just, I feel like sometimes I'll find myself just doing notes for 8 hours and then I'll realize actually none of it's gone in. You need to shake it up. You need to test yourself, have the variety. So yeah, just try and keep things interesting and try and learn about, like, don't ignore the fact that you tend to remember more when you do it in a certain way. Like, listen to that and adapt your revision or whatever as a response, is what I'd say.
Yeah, good advice. In actual fact, there's been a lot of educational research suggesting that the best way to remember things is to be regularly testing yourself on it. Like you say, just sitting reading through something for hours, it's maybe going to go in one ear and come out the other, and not much of it's going to stick. But if you actually keep testing yourself on it and looking at it in different ways, it helps it to stick a little bit more. So when you're not running up a fell or studying to become a doctor, what sort of stuff do you do to chill out, and what recommendation can you give to our listeners for maybe a book that you've read that you would recommend, or a film to watch, or an album to listen to?
So one of my favorite podcasts is They Walk Among Us, it's called, which is like a true crime podcast which talks through, in a really nice voice, some true true crime from the UK. It's not like some of it is major serial killers, but a lot of it's like just like people who were normal people, and then they committed this crazy crime, which I find really entertaining to listen to. And yeah, I think there's some other good podcasts. Yeah.
When do you listen to that when you're running? Do you just listen to that?
I used to listen to it a lot when I was running, but then I found that especially if I was running at night listening to it, I just got too creeped out by like the trees started looking at me, and like I started hearing things. So I can't do it when I'm running anymore. But sometimes like on the train or in a car, whenever. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how often do you manage to get yourself back to Teesdale? When was the last time you were? Obviously, it's been more restricted because of lockdown, but how often do you manage to get back?
Normally like once a term. Last time was Christmas, and then before that was, I think it might have been the lockdown in March. But yeah, I always love coming back to Teesdale.
And still keep in touch with friends from the school that you went to school with?
Yeah, still close with quite a few of them, and it's nice seeing everyone go off and do their own thing. And everyone's changed quite a lot, but it's nice to see everyone like become their best selves.
Yeah, and that I guess that's at the heart of this podcast. That it's interesting to see all the diverse things that people have gone on to do, yourself included. So thanks very much for your time, Alec. That has been very interesting, and I look forward, hopefully, to catching up with you again soon sometime.
Thank you very much.
There is a young man with a great drive and determination to follow the career path that he is really passionate about. And he has a clear idea of what he wants to do and a clear idea of where he wants to go in the future. If you have an interesting story, if you know somebody who has an interesting story that would be good for this Made in Teesdale podcast, then please do get in touch. Until next time, stay safe, take care, goodbye.